So I'm about to wrap up the first cabinet refurb. One thing I'd like to point out, replaced 16 capacitors on the crossover board, and some of them had to be doubled up because the original values are no longer available. One thing I've found useful, a lesson that I learned a long time ago, and something like this, when I remove the original capacitor, I take a Sharpie and I write down the value underneath, because without a schematic you wouldn't know. And I'm easily drawn away from work by a phone call or a text or a customer at the door, and if I set the capacitor down in a pile with many others that I've pulled off, well, then I have to go do a little research and find out what it was. Plus, if a problem arises in the future, for some reason, whatever reason, with the customer, and I have to go back and prove that everything is where it should be and all is good, well, I have something to fall back on. Plus, it may alert me to a mistake that I'm guilty of. God forbid. Anyway, I labeled everything. These cabinets come from the factory labeled A and B. I'm working on B cabinet first because that was the customer's main complaint, and rightfully so, as I found both woofers had voice coils that were scratching rubbing, thank you, the inside the voice coil gap, and I got them recentered as shown, and they both work fine. Yeah, so I label everything as B cabinet, right? Even the bottom of the cabinet, the panel I removed, the top panel I removed, everything, just in case I start getting in there and I decide to start taking apart a cabinet. And again, this is just from my own personal experience that I've learned to do things like this because I'm prone to being scatterbrained, perhaps, or just getting a little misguided. All the screws and components off this cabinet labeled B and set aside. Stuff like that. You might want to take that into consideration. So one thing I want to add, and I probably mentioned earlier, but I can't remember because this video has been spanning days now as I get other work coming in, and the customer said take my time, so I'm taking my time. But he did supply me with a little baggie of rubber grommets to replace in the woofers, which is a good thing because the old ones were just falling apart. Just as soon as I touched them, the top would separate from the bottom. They just come apart. So top speaker. And what I wanted to note was, as I install the components, I'm going to run some signal through it, make sure each speaker is working properly, tweeters, the mid, so forth, instead of just slamming the whole thing together and plugging it in and then finding a possible issue that I have to go and, you know what I'm saying, take it all apart and hunt down. So that's my method. Works for me. If there's an issue with this speaker, I can stop right there and focus on it. Know what I'm saying? Before moving forward. Anyway. Alright, so my customer described the B cabinet here as being the problem. The worst of the pair that he brought. And so now I've got the two woofers and the steel bar in there connected and all sealed up, the insulation reinstalled, the top and bottom replaced, and running some bass tones for test, and it sounds great. Here's the crossover doing its job, taking the high end out of the woofers. Very good. So far, so good. Now to reinstall the top.